Good morning, everyone. I'm John Thornhill. I'm the innovation editor at the Financial Times and the founder of Sifted. Really thrilled to be here today for this great event. I'm also delighted to be joined by Cédric O, the Minister for Digital Affairs for France. Thank you very much, Secretary of State, for taking the time to talk to us this morning, particularly at such a difficult time for France, given the recent events in Nice. And I'm sure all our viewers will want to join me in sharing our condolences and solidarity with you. You've done an enormous amount to promote the Tech for Good movement and to put Paris on the digital map of the world. You're going to be speaking for about 10 minutes, and then we're going to have a question and answer session from me and from the audience as well. So I would ask our audience to listen to the presentation and then please pepper us with questions in the chat function. The theme of our conference is Making Europe the Most Entrepreneurial Continent. I'm very interested to hear what you have to say on this subject, Mr. Secretary of State. So, je vous passe la parole.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. At first, I want to thank you for your words on what happened yesterday in Nice. I wish I could have been able to come physically to Slash and to be able to answer the question. Obviously, that's not going to be that year. But I'm really happy to have the opportunity to take the floor in front of you and to maybe share the way we're seeing the unfolding trends on the digital ecosystem in Europe and worldwide, the way we are approaching it from a French point of view. First issue is, and I think I won't be long on that point, is the importance of tech in the overall economy, but also in the to some extent, international talks that we are having these days. There is no discussion between President Macron and his counterpart, be it Donald Trump or the President of China or any international leaders that does not involve a discussion about tech and the issue that are brought about by the development of the digital world. So tech has become really pivotal for both our economy and our sovereignty, and pivotal finally in the day-to-day lives of our citizens, especially what we are seeing and that the whole world is seeing during the lockdown period. And if you look at the competition as this is unfolding on the international scenes, we have seen over the past years a fierce competition between the US and China that is entailing a lot of issues for the European economy, but also for the European sovereignty. That is why France, but also now Europe as a whole, with the action of Commissioner Thierry Breton or Margaret Vestager, for instance, has been laying such an emphasis into being able to get back in the race that we were kicked out of over the past years, and being able not to be at the table, on the table, but to be at the table as the president is putting it. And if we want to be able to get back in the race, we have to invest more. We have to frame our ecosystem and the way this is working in order to make it as competitive as the ecosystem are in the US and China. This is why we've been implementing, as far as France is concerned, a lot of reform as far as taxation on capital gains is concerned, as far as labor market is concerned, as far as investing in some key critical technologies such as artificial intelligence, quantum computing, cybersecurity, and so on, because we need to get back in a race. I think that the overall trend are really good, be it at the French level, but at the European level. If you look at the French level, the competitiveness of the whole French tech, as we name it, ecosystem is improving quite fast. We have been able to double the amount of money that is invested within the French ecosystem over the past 2 years. France has been semester one, the leading country in the European Union in terms of amount of money that is invested within the French startups, which is the first time over the previous history. And if you look at for the figures such as the number of unicorns, amount of money invested, but also the trend of people coming back to France, investing to France, the trend of international investors coming to France and considering France as a mature ecosystem. The trends are, from a global point of view, quite good, but this is not enough. This is not enough because if we want to be on a par in the coming years with the US and China, and I speak from a European point of view, we have to do more. And I think this is a question of independence and of sovereignty. If we are not able to be at the right level of commitment, then we will be kicked out of history. And I think this is something that is quite urgent, and I'm really pleased with the new ambition that is supported by the European Commission at the European level. We have to invest more, and we have to be at the right level of commitment. This is absolutely needed and urgently needed. What we have to do and what we want to build, it's their paradoxical trends. We have to be more sovereign but more international. Digital is something that is internationally approached, so we have to be at the right level in international standards in terms of how you the possibility for your startuppers and entrepreneurs. You have to be in the international standards as far as taxation is concerned, and so on and so on. This is also why I think that Europe has to work on its attractiveness, especially taking into account the trends that are unfolding in the US or in other countries. I think that we have an opportunity. We have an economic opportunity because the economic mood in the US is not as good as it used to be. And because the European model, which is different from the American one and the Chinese one, is really attractive in a period that is quite difficult for all the people all around the world. And I think that that the balance that we have in Europe with the quality of living, public services, but also an area where you can innovate and entrepreneur can find the right framework is something that we have to build on. This is imposing us to ease some regulation. This is imposing us to get back into international standards, as I mentioned. But I think that we have a huge opportunity. And I'm really optimistic for one major reason is that the battle and the competition for tech is at first a competition for human intelligence and for people. And the trend that we are seeing these days are really encouraging in terms of attractiveness of Europe and especially of France in terms of talent. Europe and France have historically been producers of talents that to some point were going to the US to develop and to create companies. What we are seeing is that those talents have now the framework and the environment in France and Europe to develop the next giants or the next tech champions here without being forced to travel abroad. And I think this is the most encouraging. Last words that I want to say is that I think that there is also another thing on which we have to be working as a community, and the whole tech ecosystem should work on it, is the responsibility of the ecosystem. I think that we are seeing all over the Western world questions about the impact of tech on the society, on inequality, on environment, on diversity. And I think that if the tech ecosystem is not able to take over those questions and to be more diverse, more caring more about this impact, then this will be a huge issue in the coming years. And I think that if tech is not able to transform and to be more diverse and to show that this is onboarding the general interest, we will have more Brexit, we will have more yellow vests in France, we will have more anger of the redneck in the US. And I think this is something that we have to onboard. Otherwise, this is not going to be a sustainable situation. To conclude, I would say that I think that building an international and a worldwide ecosystem takes time. And what we are seeing unfolding this day in France, but also in Europe, is something that has been built over the past 10 previous years. And this is the same went for the Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley was founded in 1950 after the launch of Sputnik by the USSR. And so this is normal that even if we are a little bit lagging behind, it takes time to get back in the race. But there is, to some extent, a sedimentation effect. And we are reaping the fruit now of something that has been started over something like 10 years ago. And I think with the network effect, we will see in the coming years more and more results of what we are doing, but we have to keep up with the pace and to keep up with the reform if we want to be able over the next 10 years to build something international.
Thank you very much, Secretary. I think you raised a lot of very interesting issues. I particularly want to focus on this seeming paradox of you stressing sovereignty and internationalism and your emphasis on human intelligence. So we'll come back to some of those issues. But I'd like to start off, soon after you became Minister for Digital Affairs last year, you gave an interview in which you said, if we want our children, our grandchildren to get jobs, we can't do it without startups. Now, I used to work in Paris as the bureau chief at the Financial Times from 2004 to 2009. And at that time, I think startups were seen as somewhat kind of quirky, exotic creations. They weren't really central, I think, to the kind of French economy and ecosystem. Tell me, how much has that changed now? How much are startups at the center of French economic policy? And how do you think you are putting an emphasis on that?
Well, I think that the mood in Paris has dramatically changed since 2009. And it is something that has been, to be honest, transpartisan for the past 10 years, but there has been a huge acceleration with the election of Emmanuel Macron for two reasons. The first reason are hard science figures. I mean, reforms on capital and taxation gain, reforms on labor market, and so a number of reforms that have eased the business environment and make it one of the most attractive over continental Europe, has brought about a rise in the economy. First issue, and the results were crystal clear. France has been, for the first time in 2019, the first destination over in Europe of foreign investment, and it was considered one of the most favorable countries in terms of foreign investment by foreign investors in the world, and one of the countries that has improved the most its attractiveness. But I think the second thing that is maybe even more important is the emphasis that has been laid by the president himself on the entrepreneur, and saying and supporting and advocating for the fact that entrepreneurs are the future of France. If you take the size of the challenge, I just want to mention one figure, that the last IPO of a tech company over 1 billion euro valuation in France was 1996. It was Dassault Systèmes. It tells you everything of what we have been what we have failed on, and what the French government have failed over the past years. And so this is why we have been completely overhauling our approach, saying, yes, we have to transform our big business, legacy businesses such as LVMH, Renault, Safran, Airbus, but we have to be able to make new champions and new business emerge. Otherwise, we will be kicked out of this. Mm-hmm. And we have been inputting a lot of energy, and with not only have we been able to walk the talk, but also to walk the walk, since we introduced a lot of reforms. But I think the energy and this stage of the president himself telling the entrepreneurs, we want you to stay, and we want you to build international business and new big techs here, was really, really important.
Now, you focused on how much has changed over the past decade, which is unquestionable, I think. I was looking at a recent study, though, of McKinsey, which showed that although Europe had accounted for about 36% of all startups globally over the past decade, it only accounted for 14% of the unicorns last year that there were in the world. And they identified a kind of funding gap. Europe is very good now at creating startups, but it's not particularly good at scaling them. And we've heard from previous sessions in this conference about this kind of lack of scale-up financing, the inability to take promising startups to kind of global level. What do you think Europe can do to address that?
Well, I think it's a sedimentation effect. If you take the French example, for instance, we have 10 unicorns. If you define them by the books, 6 have became unicorns over the past 2 years. So there is an acceleration of the number of unicorns. We had a goal 2 years ago, which was to have 25 unicorns over 2025. This is no longer a goal because we will outperform it. Now our ambition is to have decacorns or 20, 30, $50 billion worth companies. And I think that this is changing every day. And the fact that when you are building an ecosystem, this is a sedimentation process. And when you have network effects, then you reap the fruits, is making me very optimistic. If you look at another figures that is really telling for me, is that if you look at the unicorn, the French unicorns, the French unicorn to be, there are something like 40 unicorns to be in France, which are companies that are valuated between 500 millions and 1 billion. They all have international investors, such as worldwide known venture capital funds at their capital, in their capital. 2 to 3 years ago, when a foreign VC would invest in a French company, it would ask the company to flip and to take the headquarters to put it in the US. This is no longer the case. And if you look at examples such as Snowflakes or Datadogs, which were created by French founders, those founders gave an interview a few weeks ago, and they said, we had to move to the US. We created the company 5 to 10 years ago. We had to move to the US to make a worldwide company at the time. Now we're considering that if we want to create a company, we will stay in France. And I think those are really the most hard science figures or facts that shows you that the mood has changed. We are still lagging behind. I think that we have to be completely clear. We are lagging behind, and we need more financing, more unicorns. But I think that the underlying trends are really good. First thing. And second thing is that I don't think that, at least as far as France is concerned, there is an investment gap. I think that now when you're running a good business in France, you find financing, be it from a French investor or international investors. The average amount of the tickets that are invested in France have been drastically growing. And we have been seeing over the past weeks rounds of 200 million worth or 100 million worth rounds. So I'm not worrying anymore about private money. What I think we have to unlock, but this is also a sedimentation process, is IPOs. I think that we have to see listed companies that are 20 billion, 50 billion worth company. And this is still what we are a little bit lagging behind, but I think that the overall trend will unlock that problem in the coming years.
Right. I'd like to return to the issue that you stressed in your speech about being both more sovereign and more international. And you hear a lot of talk at the moment around Europe about the importance of technological digital sovereignty. I'd like you to explain to us, what does that exactly mean, and what do you expect from the forthcoming Digital Services Act from the EU?
Well, I think that sovereignty means independence and ability to choose. If I am straightforward, what we see with the, how to put it, instability of the US in terms of decision should force Europe to have European choices. And we have to be on the whole technological value chain able to have European providers. This is not the case. There are a lot of critical technologies, such as the cloud or AI, where we're really lagging behind. So if we need to continue to work with American companies. I think that the idea is not to kick them out of Europe. That would be completely crazy. But I think that we have to have the choice. And at least this is an international question. If you look at, for instance, 5G equipment, I think this is a problem for the US not to have any US providers in 5G equipment. But the same goes for Europe in cloud or in artificial intelligence or in some key critical technologies where we don't have the choice. So I think building the choice takes time. That's why we need to invest now, maybe not to compete on the past technological battle, because sometimes it will be too hard to bridge the gap, but in the next one. That's why, for instance, France is pushing so hard on critical investments in AI, in quantum computing, in cybersecurity, because those are the next technological horizons.
Now, you mentioned cloud computing there, and there has been a big Franco-German initiative to promote Gaia X as a kind of alternative European infrastructure. Can you tell us about that? I mean, are you really going to compete against AWS or Microsoft in this area?
Well, I think that cloud is one of the most challenging, one of the biggest challenges that we are facing, because this is one of the areas when I don't know if Europe has lost the war, but at least it has lost a lot of battles. What we say with Gaia X and that Gaia X initiative with German is not that we want to kick out the American cloud provider. This would be a nonsense. Is that two things? First, we want to be able to build European cloud providers that have the highest ability to offer us a choice, first issue. And second issue is that we have to build standards that makes us or make European companies, but also government, independent in terms of choice, be it between American or European cloud providers, but also between American providers. Because there is that silo approach in cloud that is a huge issue of concern for us. So, yeah. So Gaia X is both an industrial approach, but also a standardization approach.
Okay. You're also talking about, in the Digital Services Act, one of the main thrusts is kind of sharing of data, forcing big tech companies to share their own data sets with other people. Can you tell us more about that? I mean, what is the idea behind that?
Yeah, I think that regulation of tech is something that is an international concern. I've been traveling to the US a few months ago before the COVID crisis, and I met with a lot of US academics, regulators, or former regulators and companies. And the question of the fact that some companies, that could be US, but also Chinese, but I hope that we will have the same issue with European companies. The footprint of those companies on our economy and even on our democracy has become too big. So they have to be regulated for what they are, which is what we call structuring companies or gatekeeper companies, or companies that have a footprint on our economy that is too big. To some extent, we have been doing that in other domains over the past decades on companies that were having the hand on what we call vital infrastructure. So the goal of the DSA, which is led by Commissioner Thierry Breton and Commissioner Margrethe Vestager, is to put a new framework of regulation. Actually, there are two texts. The first one is the DSA, Digital Services Act that you were mentioning. And there is also the Digital Market Act that is focusing on competition. I think we have to unlock competition. That would entail to open up some the process or the way some companies are working in order to input more competition into to some areas or some economical domain, and to be able to downgrade the footprint that they have on the economy, because they have become they are in a monopoly or in an oligopoly situation, and they have become so important that they are now gatekeepers of some part of the economy.
Would you favor the breakup of some of those big tech companies?
I think that we all agree at the European level that breakup is a solution, but this is an ultimate solution. And I think that if we want to address on the short term the issues that are raised, the issues that are raised by those companies, we should focus more on the break them open approach than on the breakup approach. I think breakup is something that is at first legally uncertain, takes a lot of time. I recall the fact that when the IBM issue was addressed, or even the Microsoft issue was addressed at in the US, it took, I think, 15 to 20 years. And well, you can cut something, but it will regrow, and we have in the winner takes it all economy. So I think the issue is much more on how you frame an ex-ante regulation that makes that allows you to regulate the business models of those companies.
Now, as an Englishman, I have to raise the very painful issue of Brexit. You gave an interview with Sifted earlier this week in which you said Brexit is a huge opportunity for us. Can Paris overtake London as the startup capital of Europe?
I think this is a goal. I think that in the tech ecosystem, nobody is competing to be number two. So as everybody in Europe, the UK, Germany, Italy, we are competing to be number one. And this is really I don't think that any entrepreneur is starting a company thinking that it will be number two. The same goes for countries. But I think that we have to be in a co-competition. I mean, each European country has to be as competitive as it can be in terms of framing an environment for the entrepreneurs, the worldwide entrepreneurs, that is attractive enough to build European tech champions on the European soil. But we have to be able to work together in order to define a level playing field that makes Europe, especially the EU, since there is a single market, as attractive as possible. But if Germany is improving its competitiveness, I'm really happy with it, because I think that it will make Europe stronger. But from a European point of view, obviously, France is not competing to be number two. If we are honest, the British ecosystem is leading the way in Europe so far, has been leading the way. And if you look at the amount of money that is invested within startups in the UK, it's much higher than in France. But the overall trend is quite good for France, and we want to continue with it.
One of the things that your government has done is introduce a very kind of friendly policy on visas and focusing on that human intelligence that you were talking about earlier. How is that going? How is that enabling you to attract talent from around the world?
Well, from a qualitative point of view, we have very, very good feedbacks of major French startups, or even of foreign startups set up in France that have branch companies in France.
Do you have any numbers on that at all you can share?
And I do not have any numbers to share, but every entrepreneur that I'm talking with I'm discussing about the French tech visa is really happy with it, and we consider it now the most open tech visa all over the world. To give you an idea, I have a number which is that 900 companies have been taking advantage of that visa. I don't know the number of persons that were concerned, but 900 companies. And to give you an example, I was talking with a French entrepreneur a week ago that told me that he wanted to hire someone, I think it was from Nigeria, that was working in the US for a US company, and to take him to Paris. From the day he started the process to the day till the day when the person and his family set a foot in France, it took 15 days. So this is an example of what we have to be able to achieve. We see that there are immigration issues for the tech ecosystem in the US or even in UK, and we think that if we want to build something international in France, then we need more international talents. So that's why we have been designing that whole process.
Now, we have a number of questions coming in from the audience, and some of them are really focusing on the lack of a European single market, whether it's issues like tax or registration of companies or the allocation of stock options and the treatment of stock options. We are still an incredibly fragmented market in Europe. What is the French government and the EU more generally going to do to address those kind of issues?
Well, I think that's the real issue. If we want to be able to be at the critical size of investment and to build a market that allow our entrepreneurs to build to compete on a par with their American counterpart, strengthening the single market is something that is really needed. And it's always too slow, but we have been able to make progress over the past years. The issue, to be honest, is that the question is not the digital single market, because a company that is operating in healthcare wants a single market of the health environment. A company that is operating in digitalizing education wants a single market of education. It will take time, because I don't think that the European peoples are ready to have a single market for health or a single market for education. But things are improving over the time, especially as far as capital markets are concerned. This is the first issue. And this is also why we are advocating at the European level, for instance, on stock options. I think that in France that we have been able to design a stock option environment that is maybe not on a par with the US environment, but is really interesting, that is almost on a par with the US environment. And this is something that we are advocating to build at the European level, because we think that being able to attract talent is the beginning of everything.
Mm-hmm. We have an interesting question here from Raya Mustafi, who asks that there are lots of countries around Europe doing very interesting things in the tech space, and points to Estonia and Finland and so on in particular. What can European countries learn from each other and kind of pooling best practice?
Well, what is really interesting with Estonia is the way the state is functioning, and how digitalized public services have been able to foster the development of private services, digital private services. I think to this regard, Estonia is an example for the whole world. But well, to some extent, I think it's a little bit harder to digitalize the French administration with its 100 years history than to build from scratch a digitalized administration. I think that what we are facing now and what Europe I'm quite optimistic about Europe being able to make new champions, to be honest. I think that European entrepreneurs are the best. I think that the European engineers are the best. And I think that if we are able to keep the talents, it will be okay. What I'm much more worrying on is the digitalization and the transformation of both the legacy business, our big companies, we have a lot of them in France, and digitalization of the society. Because there is a digital divide or the digital gap within the society, and this is the Brexit, and this is the yellow vest in France, and this is the 30% of the population that feels not on board. Just to give you some figures, in France, one person over six never uses a computer. So there is a sixth of the French population that is not using a computer. There is a third of the French population that is lacking basic digital knowledge. I think that if we want, so we have to be able to build the most favorable ecosystem for our entrepreneur, and then let them do the work, and it will happen. What we have to be able to take care of at the European level from a state point of view is the rest of the population. Otherwise, we will see a growing anger. So we have to take everybody up and to be able to ensure our people that they will be on board of the digital revolution. And I think that is really what we have to be able to do from a state point of view and from a European point of view, but because I think that everybody is sharing the same issue.
Okay, I have an interesting question from Jake Benford, who's asking, is it possible, and if so, how, to steer tech innovation towards meeting societal needs? How can we ensure that kind of tech innovation addresses the big challenges, whether it's climate change or healthcare, rather than just providing money for the next pizza delivery app?
Well, I think that is up to the entrepreneurs. I'm not sure this is completely up by state to the state. And I think that when I see the French tech ecosystem, which is the one I know the most, I see that more and more entrepreneurs are tackling environmental or societal issues. And the way they see their mission has drastically changed. They see their impact as something that is one of the most important KPIs in their business. And that makes me really optimistic. I think that state has a responsibility to be able to, when something is emerging, to take it to the right level, to generalize the use of something. But I think the real solutions won't come out of the state. The real solution will come out of the change of the state of mind of the entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm. Okay, you were talking there about the importance of Europe asserting its sovereignty, mostly vis-a-vis America, but clearly
China.
And China as well. I mean, we've had the whole example of Huawei. We've also had the issue of TikTok and what's happened in the US. What do you think should happen in France and Europe with TikTok?
Well, first, there is no parallel between the US and China. The US are competitors, and we have to have our own independence, but they are our allies. So I don't want to put at the same level China and the US. We don't have any problem with China. We are trading with them. They are friends, but the US, it's much more than that. They are our genuine allies. So I don't. We are laying the emphasis on the European sovereignty, but there is no parallel between US and China. This is the first thing I want to do. Mm-hmm. Well, on TikTok, and to have to wait my words, but my personal opinion on TikTok and on the technological debate that we are seeing is that you cannot make a parallel between core telecommunication equipments and a social network for youngsters. So from a French point of view, the US are a great country. They do what they want with their decision, but we don't see a huge issue about the TikTok with the European sovereignty. What we need TikTok to do is to be able to fight at the right level of commitment, hate speech and sexual harassment and the problems that we are seeing unfolding in those social networks. But there is obviously a discussion on 5G equipment, and France and all the European countries have been taking strong measures. And we understand why this is so important from a sovereign point of view. I'm not sure we share the same approach as far as TikTok.
Okay, we're running out of time, so this is probably the last question, but what are some of the most important lessons you have personally learned over the past few years about the policies that have had the biggest impact on startups? Where do you think governments really can make a difference?
I think that the most important thing that we have been doing is showing love to entrepreneurs. I think that obviously the reforms that we have been undertaking and that are huge from a French point of view. I think that taking down some taxation that we have been having and that were French specialties over the past decade is really something really important. But actually, it only gave credibility to the message that the president has been carrying. And the most important was the message. And the most important thing that we have been doing, and which is, I think, our most important asset, is the fact that for the president himself, entrepreneurs are the future of France. And that no matter what is unfolding in other domains, we have to take care of them. And we have to tell them that they are the future of France. And I think this was the most important thing. This is much more psychological than economical. And the reforms that we have been taking were only backing that approach. And it showed people that we were not only talking the talk, but also walking the walk. And it was also something important because we have an ongoing change in the state of mind of the administration. And I think this is the most important part of what we are doing. Mm-hmm. The leadership issue.
A number of people have suggested that this latest COVID crisis has kind of accelerated the future, that we have kind of vaulted into this digital future more quickly than we would otherwise have done. Is that right, do you think? And I mean, it sounds a terrible thing to say that there are opportunities created by a crisis, given that so many people have tragically lost their lives. But what can we now do to build back better from where we are?
Well, I think the basic question that we have to answer is who will take advantage, the biggest advantage of the crisis. If we look at backwards, the American big techs have built a part of the power on the crisis of 2008. So the question that we have to answer now is how we frame the environment for our startups and our entrepreneurs in order for them to be able to be those who win over the crisis.
Okay. I think we must draw it to an end there. But I think you've raised some incredibly interesting issues. The importance of really developing and making sure that the digital single market works properly. The importance of human intelligence. Europe is stuffed full of extraordinarily talented tech entrepreneurs who need to have their say. And as you say, they have to be shown more love. And I think that you've made quite clear that Europe is moving incredibly fast in this new area. I guess the overall question is Europe moving fast enough given the speed at which other people are moving. But Mr. Secretary of State, thank you very much for joining us this morning and sharing your thoughts with us.